Hey everybody, I'm Braden and I am slightly less new, but still new. Today we are going to be reacting to a video from the Whatever channel from their dating show podcast. I'm not familiar with the Whatever channel. I just saw this clip on Twitter and I figured a 2-minute clip that I saw probably has some more context. I went back and looked at it and saw that there are a lot more things that were said. In fact, this episode, apparently all their episodes on the Dating Talk podcast are well over 5 hours long. So a couple things before we get into reacting and responding to some of the things that are said here. Number one, I am not reacting to the entire podcast. I don't have the time, and neither do you. Number two, just because I am not reacting or watching the entire podcast does not mean that I have not looked at more of the video than I am showing you, or that I am not familiar with the arguments that are being made. Because as you will see, a lot of the arguments that are made in this podcast by these individuals, they are regurgitated frequently. They make the same arguments multiple times in a short period of time. The other thing is, I am not going to talk about who these specific people making these arguments are. And the reason is because I don't care who they are. Their content is reaching a bunch of people. The Whatever channel has several million subscribers and these videos get several 100,000 views. So people are consuming their content. They don't need anybody to be told who they are. And also, I don't care. I don't care who they are. They do not matter to me. Without too much more context getting into it, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the Dating Talk podcasts from the Whatever channel.
At least in the criminal side of it, fathers in the home play like every situation I've seen. So I wanted to make that clear that me supporting men doesn't mean I'm not holding them accountable.
So they start off talking about single parent households, and this is a theme throughout the clip, talking about how boys specifically who are raised in single mother households are more prone to committing crime as adults. There are several reasons for this. It is not simply just because they are in single parent households. There are also frequently socioeconomic and other factors that go into why someone would turn to criminal activity in adulthood being raised in a single parent household that don't only have to do with the fact that a single woman was raising them.
You're saying that in order to make men great again, we need to have as many fathers in the home as possible?
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with that.
So in order to make men great again, that tells you a little bit about who that guy is. We're going to make men great again. And in order to do that, we need as many men in households raising children as we possibly can. Now, I don't think to this point, other than maybe some of the presuppositions that they have that are clearly at play, nothing that has been said has been incorrect. Before we get into this, content warning for basically the whole video. There are several things that they talk about that can be triggering, but these are listed right here.
When fathers weren't in the home, men went to a lot of gang-related situations, and they would do things to fit into the hierarchy and doing those things.
It's interesting that she mentions here men who grow up without a father figure doing things to fit in with a hierarchy. It's almost like she's on the precipice of what might be a good analysis about the pressure, external pressure on boys and young men to assume their role in a hierarchy of sorts, but we never get there. We never get to why hierarchy might not be the greatest structure for anything really, but especially in this scenario for men fitting into a certain cultural set of values that determine the way that they act and interact with other people in the world, and especially, as we'll see later in the clip, with women.
Out of 10, they're coming from a single mother household, which is like the bane on any existence of any societal.
Yeah.
Single mother households are the cancer of this earth. If you want to have like a good, stable, functioning society, single mother households are the absolute antithesis of what you need to be doing.
So this guy's explanation, and I will mention who he is because I don't remember what his Instagram handle is, but it's something about him being hot, which I mean, everyone has their taste. I don't know. But he says that single mother households are a cancer to this world. And so he's basically making the point that women are incapable of raising healthy families.
What you need to be doing.
And feminism has contributed to that, which is
For
why
sure,
it's degenerate.
1000%.
Okay, wait.
Can we just say that
feminist-
that was why that one super chat was so interesting, because they were like,
No,
other
I
than
think
feminism, what is to blame for the collapse of the family structure? And it's like, at that point, the slice of the pie chart remaining would be so obscure, it'd be something.
Other than feminism, what is to blame for the collapse of the family structure? He says if you took away feminism for part of that blame, the remaining blame would be so minuscule that it wouldn't even matter. So we can see kind of where their minds are at. Women being empowered, women feeling like they have agency, that is bad for the world.
Agree that single parent households are
Single mother.
Women,
Single mother.
Yes.
And here they make a weird distinction because she starts to talk about why single parent households are not great. And they correct her. They say, no. We're not talking about single parent household. We're talking about single mother household. It seems that they think that single father households are acceptable and can lead to good results for the children that are being raised in the households. But single mother households are a bane to society. No one can succeed if they come out of a single mother household. But with a single father household, they can still do good.
I feel like a lot of times when people use this rhetoric, what they sometimes paint this false picture that it's okay for people to stay together if it means not being a single mother household, even if the situation, the relationship is super toxic, abusive, just not healthy. So I agree, single parent, single mother households are horrible. Completely agree with that. But I do think they're better than staying with somebody if he's being abusive to you. If he's hitting you, you should not raise your child in that environment. You should get your child out of there.
So she makes an interesting point here, saying that it's better for a child to be raised in a single mother household if the alternative is enduring abuse in a two-parent household. And you can see immediately, hot guy says, no.
You should not raise your child in that environment.
Very dismissive, very condescending. This is where we start to go off the deep end more than we are already.
That is still an anomaly. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, this is a true statistic.
It's an extreme anomaly that abuse happens. I don't know where they're getting this from. I don't think that's an anomaly. That is still an anomaly. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, this is a true statistic.
Extreme
And
anomaly.
80% of couples can recover from that in 5 years. And I think it's fundamentally selfish. And you can tell because the type of people who say that, they're like, well, I just wasn't happy, so it's better for the child. It's absolutely not. It's not better for the child.
Really
but they think that because they're so prideful, they don't want to address whatever they're doing wrong. And their partner is probably, because water seeks its own level, probably just as prideful and narcissistic and doesn't want to address what's wrong and fix themselves.
So he makes a weird claim here. I'm not sure where he's getting this from. 80% of abusive relationships can recover in 5 years is the claim that he's making. And he also says that, I guess in his view, most of the time it's not actually abuse or an abusive situation that leads to these statistics that he's bringing up, but it's more the woman in the situation being too prideful to fix themselves in order to make a better situation for their relationship and for their family. It makes no sense.
Especially young boys, if they don't have their father in the household, they're not socialized properly. Like, they're literally screwed for the rest of their lives. Daughters, they don't, it's not as effective to them. I mean, they get a little bit more promiscuous with the guys they date, but in terms of literally just derailing someone's trajectory in life, young girls can more or less recover pretty well.
So, understanding this clearly, young boys are destroyed or potentially destroyed if they grow up without a father. But if a girl grows up without a father, she can recover. The only thing that is affected is the choices that she makes as far as who she wants to date. Yeah, I don't know if we can say that the men on this podcast value women or girls at all. I wonder what they would think about a girl in a single father situation. Are they screwed for the rest of their life? I don't know. We don't know.
I was just curious. I just wanted to see an honest answer on this one. If there's someone that's very, very young, might be really religious and values marriage a lot, and goes into a marriage and has kids when they're 18, 19, 20, and then a year into the relationship, it gets really, really abusive.
From who?
So this is the beginning of the clip that I saw on Twitter. And so she starts making this point. What happens if you have a young woman who is raised in a really religious household, who gets married, has children, and abuse starts. What do we do then? This is a real thing that happens. Most men who are abusive aren't going to be abusive from the jump. If they were, then they wouldn't be able to gain access and take a relationship so far as to marriage. A lot of times, abuse does not start until after a woman is pregnant or has had children.
A year into the relationship, it gets really, really abusive.
From who?
Would you? From both.
This is so rare.
Anyone
It's so
really.
rare.
I mean, it happens.
Go on.
My point is, I'm just, yeah, even though it might be rare from what you guys think.
It is.
So they dismiss her by saying, this is so rare. This never happens. Why are you asking us? This never happens. Which is an interesting thing that gets brought up a lot, is that, okay, well, I don't have to think about this situation because I believe it's rare. Doesn't matter if statistics agree with me or disagree with me. I believe it's rare, so I don't really have to pay any attention, because even if it's happening once or twice, it is still happening. She is still raising a valid question about what you would say or what you would think in this situation.
If it would happen, what would you recommend for those people to do? Would they divorce, or do you want them to keep going in the relationship?
Keep going.
You can't divorce. I mean, that's not a real thing.
Keep going. You can't divorce. That's not a real thing. Okay.
Might be like physically abusive.
You got to endure. People are too.
You want to stick into the
wanna-
relationship?
People are
Is it
just.
supposed to be-
I mean, look,
people
I'm gonna be
nowadays
honest.
are just pussies. Everybody fucking quits. Everybody gives up. It's too hard. I'm this XYZ. This is why I'm special, so I can fuck up this entire situation based upon me being special. And the reality is, people just haven't learned to fucking endure.
So hot guy goes in again. Endure. Everyone thinks they're special. That's why these women who are being abused want to leave their abusive relationships, because they think they're special. What is implied here is that it is a common situation to be abused, and you're not special for wanting to leave that situation. But when presented with a scenario where we're talking about physical abuse happening to a young woman in a new relationship or a new marriage, he says everyone thinks they're special. Everyone's just weak. Yeah, I don't understand what point he thinks he's making, but what he's really saying is that abuse is so common that it really doesn't matter.
In this situation now, like where everybody's just creating these like super nuanced, like 1% example of like, well, what if the kid's fucking transgender, black, and abused, and he's a Black Lives Matter supporter? Like, cool, okay, I get like that one fucking
No,
minute
but I'm asking
situation.
for anyone that might be in that situation, what would you recommend?
Okay,
Endure.
I'll tell
Would
you
they
what.
give up
I'll tell you what.
divorce?
I would
I
do.
don't- that's-
I'll tell you what.
Endure.
So then he goes on and just like creates a scenario that she was not asking about. But she's asking a very specific question about something that actually happens quite often. In order for him to make his point, he has to get away from the very pointed question that she asked, because his response doesn't work.
I'll tell you what.
Endure.
I'll tell you what I would do. If my daughter was in a relationship with a guy and she gets married to him and he starts abusing her a
Kill the
year
guy.
into it, I'm gonna be showing up on their doorstep and teaching him some lessons.
Exactly.
That's what I would do.
So, Striped Shirt here takes the example and makes it about his hypothetical daughter, and saying that his daughter, in this situation, he approaches his son-in-law to teach him some lessons. He doesn't really explain what that means, but his solution in this situation is not to say, hey, I advocate for you leaving this relationship. I'm going to do what I can to help you make sure that you get out of there safely and that you are not harmed further, or that my grandchild isn't harmed further. But instead, I'm going to go teach your husband how to treat you better. The obvious flaw in this logic is that abusers are going to abuse. I don't think him talking to his son-in-law who is abusing his hypothetical daughter is going to stop the abuse.
Stand the argument to endure, because I have people close to me who grew up in abusive households, and it lasted for periods of time, and it was a phase, and they endured through it, and they ended up raising healthy, successful families to an extent.
So he says he's known people, multiple people, which is interesting because remember, they all said that this situation of abuse was rare, right? But he says he knows multiple people who have been raised in abusive households, and that abuse only lasted for a period of time. Again, probably not. Probably what happened was the abuse became public, or people started to know about it, and so the abusive party in the situation altered the way that they were abusing, or made sure that their family was a little more tight-lipped. about sharing what was going on in the household. Regardless, he makes the point that abuse happened for a period of time, stopped, and then these families were functional, healthy to an extent. To an extent. To what extent, we don't know. But to an extent, they were healthy families.
It is such an extreme example that I can't give a prescription for what other people should do. There is an element of
How do you guys feel
value.
about
Hold on. There is an element of value in what he's saying, but all I can tell you is what I would do
How do you guys
as
feel
a
about? Do
father
you guys
of
all
a
have
daughter in a
opinions about
situation like that.
Do you have opinions about third trimester abortion?
It's
Yes.
terrible.
Listen,
Okay.
terrible.
Look at how quickly you can debate it. Do you know how
Terrible.
rare third trimester abortions are? They're also really
Yeah,
fucking
they
rare. But
are.
you immediately had a visceral reaction to that,
Yeah.
right? There are households where parents are abusive to children. Like, that's not like an unfathomable thing. But for
So here, the worst person you know made a good point. Destiny makes the point, what are your opinions on third trimester abortion? Since you're digging in on the take that because abuse is rare in your view, that you don't really have to give an opinion or prescription of what people who are being abused should do. And they immediately come back with, oh, that's disgusting, that's gross. Destiny's point is, well, that's rare too. Broken clock is right twice a day. Destiny, good job for having a somewhat reasoned take.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you guys, in the Catholic Church, I know that there's like annulments for marriages and stuff.
That was a mistake.
Are there no exceptions for?
I'm assuming this guy is Catholic, so he turns to him to ask him, well, what do you, annulments, yeah? That's a mistake. All right.
But statistically, like, that's not what it is. It's kind of like with the abortion anomaly. That's not like the majority of abortions. So let's like talk about what actually happens. And what actually happens when people are getting divorced isn't these types of scenarios. It's like literally initiated, you'll probably know the stat, between 2/3 and 80% of the time by women. And the plurality of that reason is they feel unfulfilled. They want a new chapter in their life. It's like the eat, pray, love phenomenon.
Yeah.
That
Oh, man. So, if a woman is in a situation where she is being beaten and threatened and fears for her safety and her life and potentially her child's life, then and only then can she leave the relationship. And Catholic Boy chimes in and says, well, that's incredibly rare.
know the stat between 2/3 and 80% of the time by women, and the plurality of that reason is they feel unfulfilled. They want a new chapter in their life. It's like the eat, pray, love phenomenon.
Yeah.
That should be outlawed. You legally actually should not be able to do that.
What are we talking about here? Because there's no mention of men initiating divorces for those reasons. I would venture to guess that he would be a little bit more lenient and a little bit more forgiving to men who decide to divorce their wives for not fulfilling whatever wifely duties that he believes a woman should fulfill. Now, he doesn't say that, so I might be making an unfair assumption, but I would think that he would be at least a little more forgiving of men in those situations.
Not abortions, divorces that are initiated by women, Brian?
78.
80%.
78.
80%.
80%. And what percentage of those women have college degrees?
Well, it jumps to 90% if they're college educated.
Real.
Another out of context bad argument that women with college degrees are more likely to initiate divorce than women who do not have college degrees. Cases where a woman has a college degree and a divorce happens, 90% of the time, woman initiates that divorce. Now, this statistic is manipulated because it is actually more likely that in a relationship where a woman has a college degree, that those relationships last. It just so happens to be the case that in those relationships where a woman is college educated and a divorce does happen, the woman initiates that divorce 90% of the time. What is interesting here is that it immediately leads to this kind of reaction where the men at the table who have been advocating for women to endure abusive relationships are now saying that it's bad, or implying that it's bad for a woman to be educated. Well, I'm not sure what we're talking about here. What it sounds like is they don't want women to be educated. They don't want women to be able to initiate divorce. They don't want women to flee abusive relationships. They don't want women to raise their children on their own. Those are all things that were true about 100 years ago.
I agree with that.
I want to ask
but-
like one more scenario, okay?
Please.
What about if two people get married, they have a kid, and then the wife starts cheating? Do you think they should divorce?
Absolutely.
They should divorce then?
Jesus himself
You don't
said.
think
But it wasn't
Jesus,
illegal?
hold on.
Adultery.
Jesus
And you
himself
could like
said.
work things through, right?
Jesus himself said in cases of adultery, divorce is
So you think that
permissible.
divorce?
So here's the rub. She asked, what if a woman and a man get married and they have a child and the woman starts cheating on her husband? Should the man divorce the wife? And immediately they go, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Striped shirt, I am assuming by the way that he's been talking the whole time, considers himself a devout Christian. He says, yeah, Jesus himself says in adultery, that is grounds for divorce. Now, again, we don't talk about if a man is cheating on his wife. We're just talking about if a woman is cheating on her husband, because in biblical times, it was nearly impossible for a woman to initiate a divorce in cases of infidelity, meaning a man could cheat on his wife basically all he wanted to, and there was little to no recourse for the woman. But if the woman was caught in adultery, or even supposed to be caught in adultery, the man could divorce pretty easily. But we don't talk about that. We just talk about, yeah, if a woman is cheating on her husband, he can definitely divorce. But if a woman is being abused by her husband, no, she has to endure. She has to stay in that relationship.
Self said in cases of adultery, divorce is
So you think that
permissible.
divorce is worse than physical abuse?
No,
For the
Or
children,
cheating, sorry. You
Cheating
think that
is
cheating
worse
is worse
than
than
physical
physical
abuse.
abuse?
for the
Sorry.
children, yes.
Absolutely.
So cheating is worse than physical abuse, and divorce is worse than physical abuse. The argument that they're making here is that it is worse for the child to grow up in a single mother household than it is for that child to grow up in a two-parent household where their mother is being abused and where potentially they are being abused. I mean, the depths that these guys go to prove that they are the world's worst people is astounding to me.
Do you think
less
it's,
cut
if it's,
dry.
if it's
You
Yeah.
are
cheating and
setting
mental
your
abuse?
child up for failure as well if you stay in like these abusive
Look, that's not
marriages.
true.
The patterns that you have at home are going to replicate in their future, right? So if this child gets used to seeing their other loved ones and probably them being talked down upon, being treated badly, they normalize that behavior.
So she's making a good point here. She's saying, look, abuse is generational, and if a child is raised in a situation where abuse is happening, then abuse is normalized for that child. Child is probably more likely to enact abuse or to endure abuse because it is normalized. And it is actually worse for the child to be raised in an abusive situation than for a child not to be raised in an abusive situation. And this seems like really cut and dry, simple logic, but apparently it's not. I don't know what world these men are living on. I don't know because I do not have an explanation for how exactly they get to this conclusion.
The reason why I sit on this podcast and like extol the virtues that I do is because it's like I think we need more righteous biblical masculinity in the world where you actually have good men that are going to be good leaders of their households. They're not going to beat their wives or emotionally or mentally abuse them or any of these things. Like that's why I continue to do this podcast with Brian, because we need to make men great again so that we don't have these situations
no.
continue.
Okay, well, that's enough of that. So basically, Striped Shirt says we do this podcast so that men don't abuse their wives, basically, so that men are strong, biblical, upstanding, yada, 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 who cares? And so basically, we are willing to put up with men currently being abusive because we believe that our influence will change the minds and lives of men who are abusive, and so we will enable them to be abusive because we hope that they can learn and grow. Because what we're talking about is real people and real situations, and the willingness that these men apparently have to let women and children endure abuse and abusive situations in order that God can intervene in their lives or whatever. I'll return to his point that he made earlier about what Jesus said about adultery as grounds for divorce. Pretty famously, there was a woman in the Bible who was alleged to be caught in adultery. In the middle of this accusation, Jesus intervenes and says, okay, that's fine. If you're without fault, though, go ahead and do it. And so he's advocating for this woman and saves her life, where we can be sure if these men were alive at that time, they would have been in the mob.
Absolutely.
And so that's all I really need to know. Yeah. If you would like me to react to more of this podcast or other podcasts that these whatever men do, let me know. I don't particularly enjoy watching them say the most asinine and convoluted things that you can imagine. But it is an important thing to know that this kind of thinking is resurging and is having an influence on a lot of younger men. There is an argument to be made that we need to be aware that these things are being said and what the arguments are, so that we're not completely shocked when someone comes around saying exactly what Striped Shirt or Hot Man in the Suit are saying in real life. Yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back soon with another video.